Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast for the Liège-Bastogne-Liège men and women's preview. We're doing this as early as we can, even though the start lists are a little bit tentative at the moment, but the Ardennes, the early races are a pretty good indication of what is to come and which teams are starting here. So Nielsen Palace aside, with riders that have crashed, we're going to do our best. UAE are confirmed, though. They have a pretty good rider, I believe, for this
Really?
race. I think so. I mean, I said he couldn't win Flesh, and listen, I'm still not convinced that he can. But this race he's won before. His teammate has been the moral victor before in 2020, so they got a pretty good team, UAE team Emirates. But the route, Benji, run us through it. There's some changes. You and Luke have been talking off air, and it kind of went over my head because I don't really know what country we're even in here.
What country we're in? We're in Belgium. We're in the southern part of Belgium, Wallonia. It's 258 kilometers of parkour, and let's be honest about it, the first half is basically negligible. The second half is where the hills start to consecutively arrive, and we're talking about halfway through the race, we start with the Côte de Mont-le-Soir, Côte de One, and so forth. But in reality, the action in this race usually starts happening on the Côte de la Redoute, which is roughly with 34 kilometers to go. This is a 1.6, 8.7% climb. You might remember last year this climb was longer. This was 2 kilometers at 8.6%, if I recall correctly. And that is because, well, obviously, Remco Evenepoel attacked at the end of this climb last year, and the organizers were like, we don't want to make it so easy for Remco, so we're gonna reduce the climb. Nah, in reality, they made it shorter to take a more supposedly technical, smaller road run in towards the Rochefoucauld, the more important climb towards the end of the race. And according to Luc Grefte, our very intelligent producer on our end here, this might make it harder for attackers. Might make it easier for attackers. I'm not
Easier
gonna
for
misquote
attackers,
him now.
yeah.
Imagine if I
More
completely misquote
climbs,
him.
narrower, less flat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And after this, we basically go into like smaller climbs like the Cornemont, which is unimportant, 4%, 2 kilometers. Côte des Forges is pretty important though, 1.3 kilometers, 7.9%. Last year that was taken out because of floodings. Again, according to Luc Greft, our producer. He's like the genius of this parkour, apparently. And then afterwards, Côte de la Rochefoucauld, which is the final dedicated climb here. And it's kind of an important one in the sense that obviously the race gets decided here, but it's in two parts, no? Because in the women's race, we always mention this climb as in the first half of this climb, Marianne Vos gets it difficult, and in the second half, she drops, right? With the Borchel section on top.
Yeah, Boncel is steep in parts, I think, and then like if you're on in the men's race, we don't usually
Yep.
see people let go there. I don't know why. Maybe it's just a Voss characteristic, but Rochefoucauld is where it has traditionally like really split apart, and it's interesting because you look at this parkour and you think there are so many climbs and some of them are hard, like Stocker with
Yeah.
80 k's to go. It's 12-13% for 1300 meters, and if that was in a Tour of Flanders with 90 k's to go, you would see people moving.
Yeah.
And like the Molenberg's not that hard. It's obviously, we're talking paved and they're different climbs, but still, it's surprising that, when you look at the parkour, and maybe this will change, and it changed last year, but people are not just going to surely go to Rochefoucauld with Poggy, and that's because that's where I think she kicked in 2020, and
Yeah.
then it was a small group in 2021. Who won? Poggy, also
Yeah.
from, I think, a
After
small
Alaphilippe did,
group that went on Rochefoucauld. Was that the Roglic?
I
Oh,
think
not.
that's the
No,
2020
that
was
was,
Roglic, right?
yeah, but that was Alaphilippe celebrate. Alaphilippe chopped Hirschi,
Yeah.
then celebrated early, and then Roglic won. And then
Yeah.
Alaphilippe got relegated in 2020. Hirschi
Correct.
just destroyed Alaphilippe in the sprint in 21 from a group of Guru, Woods, and Bala let it out from 450 meters. So will we see earlier moves? Like, the parkour in theory supports it. I don't know. What do you think, Benji? We'll talk about which teams are more potential. Like, why doesn't it happen generally? We'll talk about specific riders in when we get on into it into the teams. So why do you think teams haven't moved earlier, like on the Côte de la Haute Levée, or I don't know, pick a climb, Stocko?
Pick a climb. Last year, there was a fact that there were major crashes, like the one where Alaphilippe was
True.
involved and so forth. So that might have already hindered riders that were supposed to go in attacks early to do stuff like that. But that also reduces domestiques on the end of the stronger team. So it also allows more possibilities to go for earlier attacks. I do feel like that year that Carapaz went early was also on La Redoute, if I recall correctly. We've seen early moves, but they're always on La Redoute and not earlier.
Yeah.
And I think it's because teams don't necessarily see it realistic to go earlier, but on the other end, you don't go with 90 kilometers on the Ronde van Vlaanderen to expect to 100% have a chance to win either. You're trying to anticipate the action that follows afterwards. And I think that's something that's possible here as well, to be honest. I think like a Jumbo-Visma is a team that isn't here with like a Wout van Aert, a Roglic, and a Vingegaard. That's the kind of team where if they wait for Rochefoucauld and La Redoute, they're going to get slaughtered.
Yeah, or like maybe Benoit hangs on in a group of 12 after Redoute.
Yeah.
But then on Rochefoucauld, when there's the real selection, he's not making the group of 4 or 5 most likely, although he was decent at Flesh. But that I agree, like, if you're even Ben Healy, frankly, like Ben Healy's very aerodynamic, but he doesn't, at Amstel we saw he doesn't have the pure punch of a Poggy. Not many people do. You just can't hang with him. And so the only solution is to go earlier or hope you can catch up later. But it's very difficult to bring back a lone attacker in this Liège parcours. Like with Remco, last year he had Bahrain chasing full gas. With Haig, they had a good team. Remember, Turns had just won Flesh on the Wednesday. Ineos were pacing as well. I know it is Remco, but it's not an easy parcours because the DOMs are tight. And it's like I mentioned in the Grand Tour stages or stage racing, like you have a really tired domestique chasing an A1 leader, they're not going to bring them back most of the time. So I do think Liège is a little bit like Hilly Milan San Remo, or the Pancho Milan San Remo, in that I see the Redoute as the Cipressa and the Rochefoucauld as the Poggio in terms of phases of the race. And of course, crashes and things can happen before, and it's attritional before. Maybe this year, if there was going to be a year where it's different, it would be this year where people are like, we are not going to Rochefoucauld or even Redoute with Poggy. We're not doing it. Yeah. So, like everyone did in Tour of Flanders, going early on the Molenberg, if I was every second tier leader, if I was EF, Ineos, I would be doing something else early. But before we get into that, if you do want to watch the race live, GCN Plus is the best place to do that. They will show as much coverage as humanly possible that is broadcast by the helicopters and the race, bringing you every unmissable moment from Liège, but also the Giro in Czech's watch, just over 2 weeks, 16 days by my count. The GCN Plus has wall-to-wall coverage of the Giro, ad-free, uninterrupted, from kilometer zero, all 21 stages. So it's not just Liège, men and women's race this weekend. There's also highlight packages to suit your schedule, long, short, or just the final couple of kilometers. And you can even watch along during our race recaps to see how the race unfolded whilst you listen to our dulcet tones. And if you want to get GCN Plus, you can get 15% off an annual subscription in certain territories by going to the link down below. Thanks to GCN Plus for sponsoring this episode. Okay, Benji.
Yes.
Can't start without going past him. Tadej Pogačar, UAE Team Emirates. They've announced their team, one of 2 teams that have actually announced their team. Ulissi Pogačar, Stekelangen, Hirschi, Groh, Schartner, Bennett, Bax. This is not just Pog. If you look at Flesh yesterday, this is a good team overall. Maybe even the best team in the race, top to bottom in terms of team construction, roles. Stekelangen early with Groh, Schartner. Hirschi's the last man. Hirschi's not in bad form. I'll say that right now. He's in decent form. Ulissi before him. Bennett's in the mid phase. marking moves, shutting things down. And backs, it has been really, really good this season as well. What's their plan?
What's the plan of UAE? I think they're going to try and get a similar plan as they did in Flesh, in the sense that they're going to try and make the race relatively hard, but their goal is Pogacar. Eh? Their goal is not to set up Ulisi in like a group ahead and in that way create a situation where Pogacar is in a better situation. No, they're going to launch Pogacar, preferably on the Rochefoucauld, is what they will likely do. Now, when it comes to UAE, we've seen in Flesh on every climb they were going harder to try and make sure that the race is hard enough. With LBL, you don't necessarily need to do that every climb for Pogacar to create that situation, because likely if he attacks on the Rochefoucauld, it's going to be him and Remco and maybe Landa or something over the top if Landa's in really fucking good form. And then we've got a group of 3 of which Pogacar is on paper the favorite in the sprint that comes afterwards. The question is, if they do go hard on every single climb, and for example, on the Rosier, they set tempo. On the Stokke already, they set some tempo to make sure there's no like groups anticipating.
Yeah.
Then it becomes interesting for Remco. Because then if Remco goes, Pogacar needs to respond himself, 100%. He always needs to respond himself, right?
Yeah, I think Remco's really could be the kryptonite to Pogacar, I guess, because, you can't just lean on your team. And that's what he did in Flesh. Like, Volta moved second Mur de Huy with Battistella. Poggy didn't react.
Yeah, but it's Volta.
No, because he had teammates ahead. When Sam Oman jumped, he doesn't have to react to that group at all.
Yeah.
Because Bennett's in that group. But no one really serious jumped in Flesh. And Liège, that's more likely. Like, Ineos have to move Sheffield early. I don't want to see Sheffield used to position Pidcock to try and do a lead out for Pidcock. Come on. That is not going to give you the best chance of a good result. And also Sheffield's been in really good shape. Now, maybe the longer climbs aren't as good for him as the sort of Brabant's climbs, but still I would be trying to move Sheffield early in a group with a Ben Healy, with a Van Wilder or Vavaka who's good, with, like we saw on second Mur de Huy in the women's race in Flesh, with allies from all the non-UAE teams, with Volta. And then it's like, okay, Stekelengen, okay, Ulisi, bring back this group. And you're going to have to ride full, or Poggy's going to have to react and do it himself. But I think if you go to, like, Landa would be happy with third, though, in LBL. So that's the thing. If I'm Bahrain, frankly, I keep Landa safe. I keep him in good position. I put him on Poggy's wheel on Rochefoucauld. He goes with Poggy. He works with him a little bit. He loses the sprint. He comes third. That honestly, that would be my game plan. It's it's sad, but it is what it is. Is that too defensive with Moritz, or should Moritz also be going with that sort of group I said?
I think it's possible to do both. Landa being a defensive character that stays with Poggy, and Mohoric being the attacking time. But the issue with Landa is also that if he didn't have that rider positioning him, he's not necessarily in the best position at the foot of Rochefoucauld. And so that's the danger if you don't have someone with him to position himself. But that being said, if Mohoric goes in those moves and tries to go in those moves, likely someone, or even Mohoric, if those attacks fail, will likely still be there to help out Landa for positioning. So I think you can try both. I think that's possible, and I think that could work out. And we're talking about Remco when it comes to Quickstep, but when it comes to his team, I'm also curious, like, what's possible to make Pogacar's life the most difficult? Because on paper, I don't necessarily see Remco insta-dropping Pogacar on Rochefoucauld in my head. And if that's not the case, if he can't drop Pogacar 1-1 on Rochefoucauld, then he's going to the line with a rider that on paper is a stronger sprinter. And Remco's sprint has gotten better, eh? Like, it has progressed, but I don't put it at the level of Pogacar yet, right?
If I was Remco, I was thinking about this last night. In what situation should Remco pull with Pogacar? Because it's not like he has Alaphilippe coming back from behind.
Yep.
If Alaphilippe's in a group of 3 behind, it's so much easier. Oh, yeah, I mean... did he come? No, he didn't come top 10 last year. Quickstep last year. Yeah, and they don't have Maura here either, so it is sort of Vivak. Van Wilder DNF last year. I presume he'll be here. But I was thinking, what situation should Remco pull with Pogacar? And I think after Rochefoucauld, he should sit in the wheel and just accept losing the race. And see, because I don't remember that happening to Pogacar too much, where Remco literally, because Poggy worked in 21 or whenever when the group went away, but it's a group of 5. Yep. And apart from Valverde, they were rolling through. She was working, or Alaphilippe was working. And so, if it's just Remco and Pogacar, if I was Remco, I'd sit on. I'd do what Roglic did in Catalunya. Because, it is possible that Remco can beat him in the sprint, but not if they 50-50 relay. I don't believe. The only way he can possibly win the sprint, whatever percentage you put on that, is to sit on Pogacar for as long as possible, and then hope he freaks out, hope he does the Tour of Flanders. I don't know, just put pressure on Pogacar, put it back on him to keep the group behind. I mean, that's very defensive. You could throw away second in Liège, but he's won this race before. So what's a second or a third? For Quickstep, probably pretty important because X Classics have been dog shit. And that, to be honest, that goes for everybody, except like Landa, where I know he said third, second podium, happy, fine. Yeah. But if you're any other rider, really, like one-on-one, I wouldn't work with him. Now, the reality is, we saw in Amstel, if it's probably a group of 4, there will be people happy to work with him because a podium of a monument is a big deal. So that's also in play. But yeah, for Remco specifically, if you move early and Poggy goes with you, say on... Well, first of all, going back, their plan shouldn't be to attack Pog on Rochefoucauld. It has to be to move in some weird moment where... Pogacar's not in good position all race, by the way. Like, he nearly crashed in Flesh yesterday, and that was with 35, 37 Ks to go, I think. Maybe less. When he was deep in the field. Find some random moment, random false flat uphill, and just... Because it's all about getting Pog off the wheel. And then once Remco's in his little aero bullet mode, that's a big ask for Poggy to close the aero bullet.
And that's when it's
10-second gap already.
Yeah. That's when he might call his domestiques to do the pace.
That's a risk.
If it is a risk. For example, if it's in between climbs, on the climbs he will be in a good position. On the climbs you can't necessarily surprise him. So you have to do it in between the climbs, like you mentioned, on terrain that is not expected to be attacked upon. Like, the question is, the problem is also, then a lot of teams might solve it for Pogacar though.
Surely not.
I think they will.
Imagine like Ineos put Sheffield on the front to pace for Pogacar.
Landa with Mohoric.
Bahrain would. With Bilbao.
Yeah. They would.
But I think that has to be Remco's plan. And if Poggy bridges across to him, which then if it's early enough and I was Remco, I would still work with him initially to create a gap and then try attack him on the flat, but it's going to be difficult. I mean, it's difficult to put a pin on the profile and say where Remco will attack, but I definitely think it should be earlier than Rochefoucauld. I think the top of Redoute is going to be... He's done that trick. It's kind of like Jumbo and Havluia-Wallers in Paris-Bay.
It's not in the route now.
Do that again? Pardon?
It's not in the route now, the spot where he attacked.
Yeah, they took it away from him. So anyway, we said what Poggy's strategy likely will be, and Remco's, or at least what we think it should be. Bardet looked good in Flesh. He's another guy who I would expect to roll through with Pogacar because podium and monument is a big deal. Krohn crashed, unfortunately, for Lotto. I don't know what his shape will be. He's another guy I'd like to see moving early. He was good in Amstel. Intermarché, Benji. They've been a little bit... They came second in this race last year with Quinten Hermans, who, by the way, was not good in Flesh and should have done Flanders, and I don't think will do too well here. Intermarché, they've had a lot of injuries. I'm not sure who's turning up for them, but yeah, they've not had a great run of it. Garou's sick. Madouas has been a bit meh. Gregoire DNF'd. We don't really know who will be going for Groupama FDJ. If Garou's, he had bronchitis, they shouldn't send him.
Yep. I think so as well. Now, when it comes to Groupama, if Godu's here in good form, he would compete, but that's not really the case. That's not going to be the case, most likely. So I don't see Groupama being the most indicative team here. And like you mentioned, Antermache not in great form at the moment. Costa and Golsons have seemed to have rolled off the form they had initially at the start of the year. Same with Calmejean. That team seems to benefit from being in form when other teams aren't in form yet, which is the February Mallorca races and so forth. And that's something they do really well. But when it comes to the races that matter on paper, they don't necessarily score as much then. Bora Hansgrohe, Bobby Ungels, Schachman, Vlasov, and Hindley are supposedly on the list. I would say for
Big
certain
flight for
that...
Vlasov.
What, sorry?
He'll have... I mean, I checked. He has time, I think, to come from Tour of the Alps.
Yeah.
And Lutsenko came from Sicily to Amstel in time. But yeah, like...
A day in between.
Okay, so he's got
It's
time.
possible.
They should send him.
Higuita and Vlasov is a good duo for this race. Higuita got 5th here last year, 6th in Lombardia. A really underrated one-day history for that kid. I'm still calling him kid, and he's probably the same age.
He's a man.
A bit younger than I am.
He was a man. The
Little monster
for Benji.
I have no clue what you're talking about.
My favorite movie. I have a mind of a 3-year-old. It's a Will Ferrell movie. Ricky Bobby. I'll drive fast. Speaking of fast, Danny Martinez not so fast this year. Ineos, he came 4th last year. Van Aert not here. Yeah. We've already spoken about, Pidcock. He's going to try follow on the steepest moments in Pogacar and Remco's wheel. But Danny Martinez not here. Not sure if he's injured or... No, he's on the indicative start list, I guess, but he didn't do Flesh. He did Basque Country. He was very disappointing there after winning the race the year before, so he's not coming in nearly with the same shape or form. Healy, already mentioned, I would try get ahead early. Yeah. Valter, Benoit, that's all the same for Jumbo-Visma. They'll be shooting for a top 5. And, yeah, that's what they'll be doing. Benoit can top 5 this race.
I don't believe in it.
I mean, the start list ain't that deep.
No, it can't top 5 this race, in my opinion.
He probably won't, but he can physically. Schelmer's. Now, that's a young man. It's a young man I'd like to talk about.
Yes.
He can beat Poggi in a sprint. I'm not saying he's a better sprinter than Poggi. I'm saying if Poggi has to do all the work for the whole way, leads him out, Schelmer's is quick as fuck. If you look at something, he gaps people in sprints. I know they're French Mickey Mouse races, but now he's up there with the big boys at Flesh second. Would have won from a better position because obviously Poggi can't win. I think he's on, and he will podium this race. He should podium this race.
I agree. I think Schelmoser will likely be a candidate, one of the higher candidates to podium this race. He's also good at one-day races in general. Like, second at Flesh is good. Eighth at Amstel is consistent as well.
Yeah.
And if we go back into history, I recall eighth in San Sebastian. Yes, that is correct. But
he's good.
I remember World Championships, Wollongong top 10 as well. So he really is good at one-day races. He's proven it multiple times before. I do believe he can prove it here. Also, he's been one of the better climbers on track at the moment. He's better than Mollema at the moment. Let's be clear. That's like obvious. Ciccone will also be good in this race.
True,
so that duo is actually going to be good at this race. I kind of feel like those riders, on one end, we're saying to all these other teams, all go in early attacks. But when it comes to Schelmoser, I'm not sure he should.
I think it's
kind of Landa.
Ciccone should. I think Ciccone should move earlier because, to be honest, if Ciccone is with a group of those sort of riders I mentioned, he can straight up drop them on Rochefoucauld. Yeah. Ciccone's punch this year, if you look at Valenciano, some of those races, has been outstanding. And
he's unmarked if he attacks.
And exactly, like, is Poggi really going to personally close Giulio Ciccone? He shouldn't, really, because he can't close everybody. So I'm hoping, because in Flesh they didn't, and listen, it's a difficult race to do it. They both just kind of did their own race on the Murder-Wee. Schelmoser was the strongest. Schelmoser has the better sprint, so he should be behind, and I think Ciccone should move a little bit earlier. But they got actually a really good team for this race, and podium is to be expected, frankly, for them, which is different from their kind of their classics team maybe. But I'm really high on Schelmoser. Mars didn't look so good for Movistar at Flesh, bit disappointing. Now with Balor out, they've lost him. They're going to try and sort of do it by compiling Guerrero and Aaron Baru and co. So they'll be shooting for a top 10 maybe. Arkea have no one on the provisional list, but I see no reason apart from the fact that he has mostly been doing it in Mickey Mouse races of a much shorter distance.
Vauquelin.
Kevin Vauquelin, I hope the God is here for Arkea, and I just want to see him with the big boys. I know he did in Paris stage race. He was good on Liège de Garde, but I want to see Vauquelin here just to get experience. He's just one to watch. If you see him on the start list, watch out for him. If you see an Arkea rider in the moves, it's probably Vauquelin. Zangler, sorry, very talented, obviously, young French rider on Cofidis, but this might be a bridge too far. It's a bridge too far for him.
When it comes to these youngsters, we don't know how they will handle the 250 kilometers because I don't recall Vauquelin having done that before, but I do believe he should be in this race, even though he's not projected to be according to his upcoming participations. But I would like to see him here 100%. And we've mentioned all these teams now, and we've mentioned Schelmos and so forth, but the overwhelming factor is, compared to last year, that last year's race was super predictable. We said in our January preview last year that Remco would attack on the Latitude. So it was super obvious that the attack of Remco would happen that early, that the race would be decided whether they catch or not catch Remco. I feel like this year, it's way more open when attacks can follow. And that's why I would love the anticipation early from a lot of the teams. Because Pogacar will have the same idea. Pogacar will be like, okay, Remco attacked on Latitude last year. Will he do that again? Will he do that again just because I might not expect him doing that again? Or will he try and do it around that because I do expect him doing that again? And everybody's going to start overthinking where attacks are going to happen, to the point that if you do it on a moment where it's not necessarily expected, like we mentioned when it comes to Remco, those are the moments where you can actually make the difference, I would think. And I truly hope we don't see too many teams trying to fight for like the third position and do put Pogacar into a difficult position, because we see so many. I think you
can do both,
teams,
like we said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think you can be conservative with one rider, Landa, Schelmoser, but don't sacrifice the whole team for that. Let Moritz go with a move early, or plan to go early. Let Ciccone move early. Make Volta move early. Make Sheffield move early. Or Healy, frankly, should be too. And if Palace is starting. And then have someone making sure you get a top 10 result behind, sitting in the wheels. I think have a mixture. I don't like the idea of sacrificing the whole team for one rider to maybe get a top 5 and not giving anyone else, if they're capable of, the opportunity to try and do something. We haven't mentioned my winner, but by the way, Benj, you haven't mentioned yet the rider I'm thinking was my winner. I'll do my predictions. You can go first. Or I'll go.
Oh, no. You'll go first.
I'll go first. Sorry, third, Schelmoser. Second, Tadej Pogacar. 5-second gap. First, Alexei Lutsenko. He's on form.
I like it.
Good in Amstel Gold Race. Giro de Sicilia. He won the last stage.
How will he drop Pogacar?
No, but they were shorter climbs. Called it shorter climbs. And he's got the head wheels. He's got see Dombrowski with the old head wheels yesterday. Tour of the Alps couldn't catch him. They changed the wheel set. He had a last stage raid in Giro de Sicilia with longer climbs. This suits him more than the shorter climbs of Amstel Gold Race. Fulsang's won this race before on Astana. They're looking good. Something's changed. He might get some freedom. Lutsenko's winning.
I found a plot hole in your theory. You're saying Lutsenko's better on these longer climbs, but isn't Pogacar also better on these longer climbs?
No, in his interview, well, first of all, we know it's impossible for Pogacar to win this race. But second of all, having won it in 2021. No, but seriously, Pogacar said in his interview after Flesh Wallone, which, obviously all the riders always say 100%, facts. He said, I've been preparing for all the short climbs of Flanders and Amstel, so maybe the long climbs, it's a little bit different. No, I do not think Lutsenko is better than Pog on these climbs. Do I think Lutsenko has a big engine that if he gets into an anticipation move, he can, on his day, just dust everybody because that's somehow what Lutsenko does twice a year? Absolutely.
This ain't Oman.
Pardon?
It's not Oman.
Lutsenko's a good rider. Let me check his. I did not check his classics Palmares at all. I'm just going purely on form. He has never top. He's top 14th at Flanders, and every other classic is 90th, DNF, 100th. So looking good. But I mean, I don't know if he was that good at that. 5th at Amstel. Did you do it last year? He didn't. I think he's on. He wasn't so good at Amstel in 2021 when he did the Ardennes last. I think this is Lutsenko time.
Okay. I believe you. I trust your
I'm just hoping
knowledge.
A strong group of second tier guys goes up the road and UAE can't solve it, and we have an exciting race with Poggy chasing furiously from behind and there's tension. That's what I'm hoping for, and that Lutsenko is the guy that comes out of that move.
Okay. Now, before I do my predictions, I do want to rant for a second about Quickstep once again.
Go.
Mauro Schmidt skipped the Cobble Classics. He's being sent. Ooh. Yeah, go get yourself a coffee. I'm about to go off.
You tell me to go get a coffee.
Well, I don't drink coffee, so a glass of vodka.
What?
Jesus.
I have to drink the vodka. Why am I drinking vodka at 10 in the morning? I just had peanut butter toast.
You're right. Anyway, Mauro Schmidt was not sent to the cobble races because of his positioning. Now, he's being sent to the Hill Classics where positioning is just as important. He's not been good at Amstel nor at Flesh, which he expected to be at Flesh. Amstel, I might have expected more from him, but he missed that initial move, which is, if you miss that initial move, you're fucked, you know? And
isn't his Flesh result fine?
His Flesh result is fine, but what is Schmidt going to do at Flesh in the first place? Send the guy to the cobble races, use him in anticipation moves, because nobody's going to mark Mauro Schmidt at this point in his career. And that's how they could have gotten better result in the cobble races. And now he's in the Hilly Classic race, and now he has to anticipate at LBL to put Remco in a better seat, I would say, because if he waits, he's not going to do fuck all on Rochefoucauld. So I think they fucked up with his calendar. This is a bit of an I'm not him moment when it comes to Quickstep and Mauro Schmidt, in the same way that EF didn't send Paulus to the Cobble Classics in the past, especially last year. And that brings me to my predictions that have nothing to do with Mauro Schmidt, but I have to get that out there. Position 3, I'm going to go with Higuita Skjelmose. You went for Skjelmose. Higuita dropped on the second last Sharav, but I think it was like mechanical related.
Yeah, but, like a Jakobsen mechanical.
I hope it's mechanical. Fuck, I'm gonna go Skjelmose as well, eh? Skjelmose third, second position Evenepoel, first position Pogacar. Play it safe.
I need a time. Is that a group of 3? What are we talking here?
We're talking about a group of 2 and Skjelmose wins the sprint behind.
Fair enough. Probably what will happen. That's how the race, but hopefully it's a bit different. I agree with you on Schmidt, although I think his Flesh result is really good. He was very good in the Basque Country. I understand what they're trying to do, but the way I think Quickstep don't understand how racing's changed, and they're failing to adapt to it. And they see Tour of Flanders like people saw Tour of Flanders in 2010. When Tour of Flanders now, you basically got to be a puncher.
Yeah.
Like, look at the composition of that front group. It's either like classic gods and Paulus, Jorgensen, the anticipating move in Flanders. And Poggy won sub 70 kilos. You know, it's punchers that do well, and E3 was the same, Jorgensen fourth. So I think they don't understand it's changing. It's being selected on the steepest parts of the climbs. People are going crazy. And these young guys, you know, even though they look skinny or whatever, they can be really good there too. So I think I don't know how they'll use him. You say anticipating, but isn't that? Don't you think they'll use him just to do a lead out for Remco or something? Keep
He
it
can't
simple.
position according to them, so how is he
I
going
mean,
to be a position Remco then? At the back of the peloton?
Yeah, maybe. Or just crash bogey. I don't know. Who knows? Anyway, that was our men's preview. Going to the women's race now. It's 143 kilometers from Bastogne to Liège. It's literally the second half of the men's race, pretty much.
Yeah.
They do all the hard climbs. They skip all the industrial estate, flat rolling climbs. For the first 130 Ks, they still do Stocku, still do Rosière, then the Redoute, Forge, Rochefort, Cell combo before 10 Ks, give or take, to the finish of flat to rolling downhill. The winners of this race have been SD Works for not as dominant as Flesh Wallone. It was Van der Breggen for 2 editions, then Van Vleuten, then Dijkman, then Vollering in 21, but that was when Van der Breggen put the race on a platter for her. Yeah. Van Vleuten in 2022 won last year was it a solo or sprint? I can't remember. It was solo. It was like a 40-second solo. Grace Brown second.
Yeah.
She went crazy. She's not in that shape right now. So this is a different race, and we have a different favorite. It's Demi Vollering. Kopecky, I think, could do well, but won't be here. Lippert and Van Vleuten lead Movistar. Riolini, Longoborghini lead Trek Segafredo. Labou, Georgie, Peppercamp at DSM. Mullman leads AG Insurance. Have I missed anybody? Castellan. We've also got like the Cash Line, probably Voss. We've got Cavalli, didn't look so good at Flesh, and Ludwig got very unlucky. She will probably lead FDJ Suez with Brown. What's Vollering's plan? It's not to go for a sprint.
It's not to go for the sprint, and the thing with Vollering as well is, like, on Amstel, when it comes to the Kouberg, I wasn't like super impressed about her performance on the Kouberg itself. The fact that she could attack afterwards says that she had energy left, right? But that didn't say to me, oh, she's going to destroy everybody on every climb of LBL straightforward. Now, when it comes to Flesh Wallon, we came into a situation where every competitor played into her favor in the last 6 kilometers to go, where they could roll attacks on her before they get to the final climb, which fit her to the bone based on the years before, and they failed to do that necessarily. And then my question is, how can Vollering prevent other teams from rolling attacks on her in LBL? How can SD Works prevent from other teams rolling attacks on Vollering in LBL? And if other teams play it right, I think that's difficult for SD Works to prevent. But the problem is, other teams have not played it right in 90% of the races they've ridden. And as a consequence, it's hard to predict for us whether, should Vollering do this to prevent other teams to roll attacks on her? If other teams don't roll attacks, if they have the perfect opportunity to do it in the first place. So I think at some points, attacking might be the offense might be the best defense, but not in the way she did on the Shirav at Flesh. At Flesh, she started hammering a tempo on the Shirav, the second last climb, and basically made a group form where other teams had multiple riders. I think Shirav is a shorter climb than the majority of climbs that fall in LBL. And when it comes to LBL, we always see an early move. We always see an early move that comes early where, well, that's usually what an early move is. They come early. Like the Dijkman move. The way she won wasn't a move that went early. It was a lot of riders. And the other teams had put a rider in there. And as a consequence, their leaders were kind of caught behind. And that's the danger for Vollering, I think. If a group goes up the road with a Trek rider, with a whatever rider, and they put Bredewald in it, for example, that's how they can lose the race.
How they lost Roubaix.
Yeah.
And it's how the Dutch women have lost in major championships when it seemed like they couldn't lose. And it's the best way to beat SD Works is to, they might only have 5 riders on the start list, like in Flesh Wallon, is to make one of their riders chase a really strong move. Royce did a fantastic job after the second Murder Wee on the weekend. Was that group ahead fully committed? Because Vollering had to close it herself. She is in so much better shape than everybody else here, frankly. Like, to close that move, to push the whole of Sharav, and then to basically do a full lead out on Murderwee and win with a gap. She's better than everybody else at the moment. If I was Vollering, my game plan would be with limited domestiques, not wanting to get into a tricky final. I would launch full gas, not like on Sharav. I would actually attack on Cote de la Redoute, go solo.
Yeah.
Because if she gets a gap of 5 seconds, the chase will be terrible
syndrome.
behind. Pardon?
Group 2 syndrome instantly.
Yeah, everyone will immediately give up. Immediately, they will stop chasing and they'll start thinking of seconds. So, attacking each other. So, I would not wait for Rochefoucauld because then you'll think, okay, maybe people start to play, on Cornemont and Côte des Forges beforehand. I'll just go full gas on Redoute, like she went early in Strata, and that's quick maths, 34 Ks from the finish, not too long, and just solo. And because she's the best, it's pretty simple to me.
Yeah, but when I compare the women's parkour to the men's parkour, Côte de la Redoute is like 1.8 kilometers, which I don't know where they're turning off at this point. Because in the men's parkour last year, it was 2 kilometers. This year, it's 1.6 kilometers. Here, it's 1.8 kilometers. So I have no clue what this climb will look like in person when they go over it and where it will end for these riders. But it should be long and hard enough for Vollering to really make a difference here and to put people in trouble. And are there people that can follow Demi Vollering if that move happens? Maybe there's 1 or 2 riders that can do that. But if they're in that situation, they're going to be happy with the top 3.
Yeah, like Lippert probably is the best chance, I would say. Lippert or Nuvia Doma to follow that move. But it is a longer climb than Sharav. So I would pick Lippert and Nuvia Doma. Will they work with Vollering if they create a group of 3? Yeah. You reckon they will?
Oh, they always do.
Yeah. If they work with Vollering and then they go to Rochefoucauld, then, Vollering probably drops them there. So she looks really, really good. But that being said, SD Works have looked very, very good before other races and have lost other races. So
yeah, but with 6 riders max, because they don't send 6 riders to every single race, 6 riders max, I do feel like there's a lot of space here for other teams to really beat the crap out of SD Works before we get to La Redoute. Because it's also not the strongest team, their Hill Classics team. Like, compared to the Cobble team that SD Works has, their Hill Classics team is about 60% of that. Reuser is great, Bredewall's pretty good, and Fisher Black is pretty good, but those are not the riders that will be there in the last 8 riders that are left. And if you come to 8 riders, there might still be a Longo Borghini, a Shirin Van Androoy, and a Gaia Realini with 3 riders in there for Trek, and they will roll the fuck out of you on paper, because they didn't at Flash, but they should roll the fuck out of you if you're alone with Vollering there.
I really think Van Vleuten and Longo Borghini got to go early. Their shape just doesn't look good enough at the moment to have any realistic chance of following a Vollering or a Lippert move on Rochefoucauld. So that, if I was them, I would move on either Rosier or Col du Marquisard, which are both miles from the finish. They're like shallower, so 4.5Ks 6%, 3Ks 5%. And then there's like a long downhill afterwards. Yeah. So I would move there.
Use them to ruin the domestiques of SD Works.
Yeah. And maybe Vollering even has to close herself, or maybe you just, because if you wait, I think for Redoute, because we just said what I think Vollering should do, then you're probably just going to be behind. So those two, because they got big engines, but their punch on the steeper stuff just doesn't look as good at the moment. So that puts Lippert and Realini in a seat. And listen, they did that on second Murderwee on Wednesday, yesterday. So it's not completely out of character for them to do that. They're probably thinking of doing that. Persico will be hoping for a top 3 from a reduced group. Jeez.
Yeah.
Toast. But to be honest, I'd love, I think Kiesenhofer might be here for Israel Premier Tech. Roland, she did Flesh. She's not done too many races this year, but who knows? Maybe a Kiesenhofer, what she did at Olympics isn't a fluke. She actually has watts, I would love to see Kiesenhofer get in the early break, because something weird could happen in this race. Like, I really feel this could be one of those weird races where, of course, Vollering is the huge heavy favorite, but we just said, like, SD Works don't have the deepest team to control on this parcours, and surely the other teams are sick of helping them. I'm looking at you, Movistar. Stop helping them. Stop pulling for them. Even if you miss the move, don't help them. So
don't miss the move. You've got one job,
well,
get in the move.
But even if you miss the move, we're not representing with Shell. No, don't help the Vollering. Make her close it. She will close it herself.
Yeah.
She has to, or she'll have to move on a climb when she doesn't want to. I'm hoping there is the kerosene, whatever, flammable liquid for that sort of weird Kiesenhofer result. And if she's on the start list, which I think she is, I'd like to get an early move. Anyway, time for our predictions. Benji, I've said all that. I think I'm going to go with a crazy top 3 again because I just feel like it. Because I feel like being difficult. Third. Third, Lippert. She's very strong at the moment. Second, Vollering. First, Anna Kiesenhofer.
Okay. I'm going to go for also a pretty random top 3. I'm going to go for 3 Georgie.
You reckon she can get over this climb?
Think about that.
I'm thinking about
How does she get into that situation? She has to go really early in a group, right?
Why don't DSM get in the break?
Yeah, they need to. A break or a group that forms later that anticipates.
Yeah.
That's the only way that Georgie will podium, but they have to because I've predicted it. So they have to make it work.
Team DSM, get in the early break.
Yeah. Labou is going to be the rider that stays in the group for later work. That seems like the logical thing on their end. Now, it's extremely unrealistic for Georgie to get third, but she was 8th at Amstel, which was pretty impressive. So I don't see it as that impossible. The second place, I will put... I'm doing something really unrealistic, aren't I? Grace Brown, second. Also from the early move.
Good in Amstel.
Yeah. And first, I'm going to say... Shirin van Anrooy also from an early move.
Oh, I forgot Van Anrooy. She got to go early too, yeah.
Early group wins. I don't give a fuck about the rest. It's really
Van
impossible.
Anrooy's a good pick. Yeah, she's really good.
I don't see it happening, but I'm going to go with it anyway.
We're trying to be contrarian because it's too straightforward to say Poggy wins and Vollering wins. We're hoping for
I don't think Vollering will win, by the way.
You don't think? I do think Poggy is more likely to win than her because I think she is better than the competition, more so than Poggy is in terms of the gap right now. But the size of the teams makes a big difference if the other teams work as a unit. It really is. Like 5 riders is not a lot to work with, even 6. So, and that's why I was at the Olympics. They had 4 riders. It really is tough to control a race for a top favorite if the other teams collaborate, if you have so few riders. But anyway, hoping for that exciting race. If you want to watch it, GCN Plus is the best place to do so at 15% off for LRCP listeners. We'll have the recap for you on Sunday. Might do a little Tour of the Alps recap, Benji. I've been following it closely for the Ineos Grenadiers fans, of which many of you are. No promises, but maybe if we're feeling it. Been some big watts there, so we might have to catch up on that with a lot of the Giro riders preparing there if they're not at altitude. But that's all from us.